Hi, and welcome to episode 5 of this Automobilista 2 track guide series, and we're heading down under this time, as the Intercontinental GT Challenge is at Bathurst this weekend. So it's the perfect time to take a GT3 car and have a look at one of the scariest mountains in sim racing. So, I'm actually using the first gen version of the McLaren 720S in this video. The reason for that is because the Intercontinental GT Challenge uses Pirelli tyres, and in this game the Gen 1 GT3s also use Pirelli tyres, whereas the new Gen 2s actually run IMSA spec Michelin tyres, so that's why I've decided to use the old car here. So, you know the score, it's a default date, 2 PM and a green track, so it's a low grip surface, and the date actually puts us in the height of summer for Australia, so track temperatures are knocking on the door of 60 degrees Celsius. You can see I've just put the setup back to default, and I would normally put 60 litres of fuel into the car, but for some reason I can only pick 59 or 61, so I'm going to pretend like that isn't really fucking annoying, and just go with 61. Now, setup changes that I did make, I went one click down on rear downforce so that we're actually maxing out on the back straight, and then I stiffened both of the anti-roll bars. At the front I went up to 14, and the rear up to 7, just to make sure that the car's ready for changes of direction. Braking pressure all the way to 100% because we've got ABS to play with, and then duct openings I went 65 and 60 front and rear. Now, much like the Curvelo track guide, rear tyre temperatures are a real pain on this circuit, so I reduced the rear camber angle to -2, reduced the ride height to 65mm, and then also reduced the rear toe out to 0.1 degrees. And then, as I often do, I reduced the radiator opening to 65%, it's completely safe, and then I set both engine braking and traction control values to 4. So lap 5 ended up being the fastest in this hot stint, so you're going to see lap 4 shortly before that, and then lap 5 straight afterwards. The two laps were actually very, very close in lap time, they're within a tenth, so they should look quite similar. So we've just crossed the start-finish line, we're heading towards Hell Corner. Now, just after the 100-metre board, you'll see this small patch of green grass. Hit the brakes just as we get there, down into second gear, and then turn in. There is positive camber to help us through the corner, but don't take the corner too quickly because you want to make sure you're getting on the throttle as early as you can, so our speed's maximised all the way up the straight. With Hell's Corner, I'd actually recommend avoiding the curb on the inside, but you can use the curb on the outside to help straighten the car up if the car's sliding on exit. Now for Quarry Bend, just after the 100-metre board, you want to brake in the middle of the service road, down into third gear, and really, really smoothly guide the car through this right, avoiding both the curb on the inside and the outside. The curb on the inside is just going to slow you down, and the curb on the outside, especially if you're sliding, is going to spin the car out. A small lift into the first part of the cutting, and then brake as the first billboard reaches the centre of your view, down into second gear, and then as you're accelerating, you're going to be fighting the rear of the car every step of the way. And it's not till we're through this right here, Griffin's Mount, that the car will actually settle down a bit. You basically want to be on the throttle all the way through to Skyline, but don't be afraid of a little confidence lift every now and then, because obviously we don't want the car losing grip and then smashing into the wall. This left here, Sullivan Park, is the one that you can most confidently take at full throttle. Just make sure that your turn-in is really strong. And then lift off as we're going over the crest into McPhillamy Park. If we can be tight on apex, then we'll have a much safer exit. You want to gently start braking roughly as we're passing underneath the billboard, reaching third gear for the left, and then second gear for the right of the S's, and then as we hit the dipper, keep it in second gear, but you want to be as smooth as you can. With the way that the track's elevation changes, you want to feel as though the car's getting scooped up by the track as you go through the apex. Now you want to brake down into third, but use both the brake and the throttle to keep the rear stabilised, and then brake down into first gear for the Forest's Elbow, and then get on the throttle just before you reach the part where the inside wall sort of juts out a little bit. By getting on the throttle as early as we can, we're just maximising our speed all the way down the Conrod straight. And with the downforce change that we made, the car's going to be very close to reaching maximum speed, but there's a tiny amount of headroom still left, so if you get the draft heading into the chase, there's a bit more speed that you can access. Looking right, there's a brown patch of grass between the 150 and the 100-metre board. You want to brake there, down into second gear, and you can be relatively aggressive on turn-in so you can get on the throttle as early as possible for the right. It's one of those rare occasions on this circuit that if you actually cut the left, you're not really losing that much time at all. And then for Murray's Corner, you want to brake just before you see the last grid slots painted on the tarmac, down into second gear. Go for a slightly late apex here, I'd recommend, and then as the curb ends on the inside, that's when you can get on the power. And we're crossing the line and we're going straight into the fastest lap of the hot stint. So we're looking for that green patch of grass after the 100-metre board, brake hard down into second gear, and then smoothly guide the car through the corner. Avoid the inside curb, so do as I say, not as I do, because you can see that our exit is quite badly compromised, and as a result we're going to be losing time all the way up the mountain straight. It's a good time to have a little bit of a break mentally, because once you get to the mountain, it's all focus until you're coming back down the other side. Now, after the 100-metre board, there's a service road. Brake in the middle of that, and then smoothly trail the car into the corner in third gear, and you can be full power as the curb ends on the inside. Now we want to lift as we turn in for the first part of the cutting, and then as the first billboard reaches the center of our view, we want to brake down into second gear, and then just a little bit of throttle just to keep the revs up and the rear loaded. But the car's going to be loosey-goosey through both rights of Griffin's Mount and Reed Park here. Again, don't be afraid to lift off the accelerator slightly on turn-in, like you'll be no less of a Chad for doing so. It's better to be slightly cautious because, I mean, as you can see here through Solomon Park, that's not great driving on my part. So to balance that out, I'm being a lot more patient through McPhillamy Park, and the exit's a lot more controlled here. Now, slight squeeze of the brakes as we pass underneath the billboard, then down into third for the left, down to second for the right, and then keep it in second, and just let the car get scooped up by the track. The right-hander before the forest elbow is really important, so you want to brake into third, but you want to use both the brake and the throttle to keep the car stable, then brake hard down into first, and then on the throttle as early as you possibly can to maximize our exit speed. Now, you just saw a lot of ragged driving over the mountain, and just have a look at the rear right tyre temperature. 120 degrees Celsius is pretty nasty. Temperatures that high mean that we're going to be losing grip, and also the tyre's going to wear a lot more quickly. So in a long race, it pays to be smooth, that's for sure. So for the chase, look right. After the 150 meter board, brake at the dry patch of grass, brake hard down into second gear, commit early to the left, and then get on the throttle as early as possible for the right. And now heading into the final corner, Murray Corner, we're looking for the last painted set of grid slots, and then you want to brake hard down into second gear, commit to the apex, but just avoid the curb if you can, and then get on the power and finish the lap. Wow. Okay, this is a very, very demanding circuit, and I have to say, it's not one of my best either. I normally try to do 10 laps for a hot stint, as I feel that's quite representative of something like a regular sprint race that you might do in a multiplayer session. But man, this combination was so tough that I kept crashing on lap 3 or lap 4 of a stint. The take that you're seeing here was the only time I managed to do more than 5 laps in a row. And then on top of that, if you have a look at the lap times in the bottom left, you can see that we're about 6/10 away from our theoretical best lap time, so it's very, very difficult to string a perfect lap together, particularly in a race situation. Now, if you're doing any races around Bathurst in the immediate future and you're actually using the Gen 2 version of the cars rather than the Gen 1s, you're going to have a much better time because the Michelin tyres those cars have are much grippier and they're much less temperature sensitive as well, so you're not going to run into any of the overheating problems that I am in this particular video. And speaking of the video, I think I'm going to end it here. I'm not at all ashamed to admit that this track absolutely whooped my ass. So yeah, if you're learning it for the first time, it's incredibly difficult and it will take a very, very long time for it to sort of get into your bones. So I'd recommend actually focusing on smoothness. You don't want to be thrashing the car around on the mountain because it's just going to cause too many accidents and it's just going to breed more inconsistency. But if you take things slowly and focus a lot more on smoothness, I think your acclimatization rate will be a lot faster and you'll get to a much more acceptable level of speed faster, essentially. So yeah, best of luck learning the track because it is really, really difficult. And yeah, I hope to see you again in the next video.